We start with a foundation that every ethical leader needs within every ethical relationship, and that's clarity. You see, clear thinking, it reduces the ambiguity inside of an organization, and it also minimizes and manages assumptions. It's so important. It also reduces gossip, and it also reduces those nasty rumors and the name calling and the infighting. And it also protects the organization justice system. And when we look at the organization justice system, it's composed of three factors, which are your distributive justice, how rewards and punishments are carried out inside of the organization. It also talks about the procedural aspect, your operation management. How do we function based upon policy and procedure, our SOPs, standard operating procedures inside of our organization? And then you've got to be able to look at the interactional justice. How do we treat individuals inside of the organization? Are we managing our in-groups and our out-groups within inside of our organization? That is so important when we start looking at clarity and ethical leadership inside of an organization. Hello, my name's Dr. Irby. I'm one of the co-founders of Irby Ethical Strategies, and I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. There's two factors with being an industrial organizational psychologist. The industrial side, I have to understand the strategic operations and the functioning of the organization, how the machine works. The organization side really ties in the human behavior aspect, because the human behavior aspect is what makes the machine work. And I know it's scary today with AI and jobs being replaced by robots, but you still have to have a collective team that makes the artificial intelligence and the robots run. I have over 30 years of experience working with very large, dynamic, complex organizations in very fluid environments. I'm a retired veteran with 20 years retiring from the United States Army. I position this argument on every ethical leader needs to be clear. And why do we need to be clear? And the reason why we need to be clear is we want to make sure that everybody understands what I'm communicating to them. It's when that sender and receiver process. And with that, if I'm sending a message, I've got to ask myself, is what I'm getting ready to say, is it true? And then I've got to ask, is the information good and is the information useful? You see, if the information is not true, I'm not going to communicate it, because then I will be telling a lie. If it's true, but it's not good, I have to look at how I'm going to approach communicating this. So I need to change my mindset, and I need to say, the words that I'm getting ready to convey, how is it going to impact those who are receiving this message? And so I've got to be able to look at the situational context, and then I've got to be able to say, what am I willing to tolerate, and how am I going to respond, and what are my choices within this situation? Jordan Peterson made an absolute phenomenal statement when he said, tell the truth, or at least do not lie. And when he made that statement, that meant do not lie to yourself. The facts are the facts. It is what it is. Don't spin it to make you feel better. It's raw. Accept it, okay? Whether it's good or either it's bad. And this really goes into your mindset. On an earlier video, we talked about your personal attitude. So when we look at the personal attitude, it's built on the ABC model of attitude. That means your affect, either you've got a positive affect or either you've got a negative affect about a particular situation. That's, what are your emotions? How are you feeling about this situation? And then you've got to be able to look at the cognitive aspect. What are my beliefs? What are my thoughts? What's the knowledge to be able to justify my feelings and my emotions about this situation? And then the most important part, because nobody can see what your affect is and no one can see what you're thinking, the only thing that they can judge you off of is your behaviors. And so based on that, you've got to be able to say, how am I going to respond and what are my choices within this situation? This is where knowledge comes from. Because please understand, a concept that I learned early on in my military career was competence builds confidence. And I also understood if we whittled that confidence down more specifically and we look at a specific skill set, that's where high self-efficacy comes in. I know that I can do this one thing very, very well. Maybe that's problem solving. Maybe that's helping individuals develop interpersonal relationships that are harmonious, that are pro-social in nature. And maybe I just am a really good communicator with being a clear thinker. You see what I'm talking about? So always remember that is the important aspect of becoming an ethical leader. Clarity. So with clarity, when we really get into that aspect, we've got to be able to say it's the quality of being easily understood, managing and minimizing the amount of questions that individuals are going to ask you. It's inside your head, and you've got to be able to ask yourself, what am I actually trying to say? And then, am I going to be understood clearly? And so clear thinking begins with when we identify the purpose of the conversation that we're getting ready to have. We are talking about a specific issue. And so when we're running through all these processes, this is when we tie in the aspect of critical thinking. And so we're all born with the ability to think. However, critical thinking isn't innate. It is an intellectual discipline, a skill that is learned over time and space. And it's something that you have to practice and get better at every single day. You see, critical thinking is a self-guided, it's a self-disciplined thinking process that seeks to be fair-minded. We want critical thinkers, they're not looking for win-lose situations. They're looking for win-win situations. They want to be able to gather in as much information from other people's perspectives, how they see a certain event, so that they can process that information, they can conceptualize that information, they can analyze that information, they can synthesize that information, and then they can develop a plan of action or either courses of action on how they're going to respond to that particular situation. We go back to being clear. That's what we were talking about, is clear thinking. It is a process of coming through and removing the fog of war, or either the mud, to be able to explain it. A scenario that we can implement is that you have these two employees, two colleagues inside of an organization, Maya and Ryan. And I'm going to use these two individuals a lot. And so with that, they miss a deadline. Maya's upset. Maya looks at Ryan and says, "You don't care about the team." And she's very angry. And she starts bashing Ryan. Ryan's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hold on. Full stop. We are simply being overworked." But what they failed to do is they escalated the situation without naming what happened to cause them to miss the deadline. And so when we analyze this situation, each person assumed the motives and substituted personal history from things that they have experienced on the immediate problem and started blaming each other. But if one individual, just one individual, would have asked a clarifying question, it would have moved from accusing each other of being the problem to really going into a problem-solving method. Before you ask questions and before you talk, you've got to be able to run these three things inside of your head. What is exactly the issue that's going on right now? What outcome do I want from here? And then you've got to be able to say, what information matters right now? Because I'm telling you, that problem that's sitting right in front of you, it's not going anywhere. It's looking up at you and it's going, "I'm right here. You guys are going to work on me." Start fighting amongst each other, because I'm going to go get my popcorn and a soda and I'm going to be entertained. Because that's what you really have to do. You've got to be able to ask, what is exactly the issue? What outcome do we as a team want, not I, but we want for the betterment of the organization. And then you've got to ask, what information is relevant? What happened? And what matters right now? So before you start communicating with another individual, you want to be able to check your attitude. Go back and ask yourself, how am I feeling? What are my emotions right now? And then, so what that means is that you got to check your tone, you got to check your cadence, and you've got to be able to check your inflection. Because if somebody's yelling at you, what you can do is you can stop. Just shut it down. Stop. Open your eyes, shut your mouth, and tune your ears in. You can listen. Listen to understand. And if an individual's yelling and yelling and yelling at you, be like, tell me more. Okay, all right, got it. Okay, all right, got it. You think about what they're saying, and then you communicate. Everybody wants to be heard. Because when you communicate to them, and the very first thing that you ask, you don't rationalize the situation. You don't throw something back in their face. You parrot or either paraphrase what they communicated to you based upon their perception. What I understand that you just said is A, B, C, and D. That right there shows that you're being attentive to them as a human being. That takes a lot of thick skin, and that really takes for you to get out of that egocentric perspective of me, my character's being attacked, and I'm being disrespected. We all do it. We all do it. And as we get older and the more we practice these techniques, we get better at this. And so it's 4 steps. It's stop, listen to understand. That's the L. The T is to think, critically think your way through the process and communicate with clarifying questions. Because then you can say, hey, from my perspective, this is how I saw the situation. Now you're moving out of the accusation framework and you're moving into the problem solving framework. And that's where we really want to get organizations. That's how we create a learning environment and a pro-social environment. And that's how we develop those interpersonal relationships. So why don't you try those techniques this week? You can try them inside of the workplace. You can try them inside of your family. You can try them with a friend. And if you want to dive deeper into ethical leadership and organizational citizenship behavior, give me a visit at my website at www.irbyethicalstrategies.com. Give me a call, send me an email, and I will reply to you. And I just want to hear what you have going on. And then I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to ask you some deep questions because I'm here to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Because you cannot fix what you do not know. And it's senseless to continue to repeat the same errors in judgment and kick the can down the road. Okay? So ethical leadership and organizational citizenship, organizational behavior, they sound like they're complex problems and they can be intimidating. And I just want to let you know we're here to help you. I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.